Hello, good morning, everybody. We are so excited to be here on our Saturday morning HyperDoc Facebook Live. Good morning. We have an awesome guest that we're going to share in a few minutes. But first, we always love to talk a little bit about what we've learned this week in teaching and learning through. So right now, I want to quickly. You guys, what did you guys see? What was a tip or a trick that you learned this week? I'll find my words.
This week I was visiting a 5th grade classroom, and it was awesome. They were doing a writing lesson, and the teacher invited them to do the smallest little tweak. She just said once she sent them off. She said, okay, lower your lids. And so the kids just lowered their lids. And then the camera went down so that we could see their notebooks. And so they were all writing, and the teacher and I were able to see the writing unfold on the page. And typically in a classroom, you're moving around the room to look over the shoulder. I call it over the shoulder data, right? So in a traditional classroom, you're walking around, looking over the shoulder to see how the writing's unfolding on the page. And in this case, the teacher found a workaround. Hey, just lower your lids, put the camera so we can see your notebook. And it was so beautiful to see the kids just handwriting, like their hand moving across the page and the page filling.
I love that.
It was awesome. Small, simple tweak to feel like she was in the room with them.
That's super fun. That's just like the classroom I was in. Lisa, you're muted. We want to hear you though. Do you have a story too?
Yeah, I'd love to tag off of that because Sarah, what I was going to share, I'm noticing teachers are really noticing they're missing that walking around and how much information they gained from that walking around and seeing kids work. I'm going to drop it in the Facebook chat. I was on Twitter this morning, and some clever person has done a Tinkercad 3D printed this little snap-on that snaps onto the top of your camera, and it reflects. You put the paper on your keyboard and you can see your paper. And it's so I sent it to my son that he needs to go 3D print these and market this. But right? And so he thought that was a great idea. And then he's thinking of a cover for the keyboard so you can actually, anyway. It was pretty clever, but I think sometimes I'm overthinking also, how can I see the kids work? And so I was working with teachers how to take photos of their work. You know, you got to take a photo and upload it to Classroom or to Seesaw. And then you guys, I just was overthinking it. And I had this big duh. You can open a new Google Doc. And if you had taken a photo, you hadn't taken a photo yet, open a new Google Doc, go to Insert, and then go down to Camera. Open the camera, take the picture of your work, and it goes right onto a Google Doc. And then you could submit that into Classroom or into Seesaw, but it just at least the work is right, or share it with the teacher. So it's really quick workflow. Because I was trying to teach second graders how to do this and with their Chromebooks. And then they started saying, I'm not on a Chromebook. And they had all these different devices. And I thought, I don't know how everyone's camera is working, but I do know how Google Docs works. So
all have Docs, and they're all using Docs. So that makes.
I love that reminder to just use what you're already using, which is Google Apps or
Deep breath.
Simplicity, less is more.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That was my to see. You got to see them working. So
yeah. Speaking of our topic today around reinventing past practices, I saw that in my classroom example this week, where the teacher just invited students in, and as they were coming into the Zoom, she was taking roll and she had music on. And so they had their entry song, just as if everyone walked into the classroom. And then they moved right into, they were filling out a Google form for attendance actually. So the routine was set to fill out the form, and then they have a student of the day. And so it was a student's birthday. And so they do 2 truths and a lie really quickly. This is an 8th grade English class. The student shared 2 truths and a lie. And then in the chat, they would say either 1, 2, or 3 for the one that they thought was the lie. And then she lets the student come up on the camera and, oh yeah, these are my 2 truths and a lie. And then here's the lie. And then they moved right into the lesson. And it was just, it kind of felt like a real classroom. Like all the norms were right. I mean, they're all real classrooms, but how to do that is one of the challenges everyone has right now. So I just loved seeing that comfortability in that routine.
That's awesome.
It was fun. So Lisa, do you want to tell us a little bit about our guest today, and maybe we can have her join us and then we can just start learning from her. We're so excited to have our guest.
Thank you. Yes, I am super excited that we have Kathleen Whitworth with us today. Some of you may know her. I think she's going to be joining us in a second, so I can embarrass her right here on camera together. There she is. Hey, Kathleen. We're so happy to have you in our show today because you are one of our #1 watchers of the show every Saturday. But let me give you a little background how I know Kathleen. So we started teaching together in Pleasanton Unified. Oh, I'm going to give the year, Kathleen, sorry. 1995 was when, before kids, like maybe even before husbands and all of that, when we were just starting out as new teachers. And it's been so fun to teach with you together all these years and learn from you and share thinking around some of our favorite subjects that we love. And I'm so excited. You are our page 16 of our book. So some people may know you from there, some of your work. And you're also the comma lesson teacher. There she goes.
Yep.
And I have dropped that link to the comma lesson, which has really inspired so many people in terms of how do you teach with this stuff. And I think that's why I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about, first of all, you're a 3rd grade teacher right now. Let me step back a little. I get too excited here. And how you're doing remote instruction, how you're teaching. And I think that's, you've got some powerful message. And I'll be quiet and let you begin.
Oh my God, Lisa, thank you for that introduction. And I just have to throw in there really quickly that I met Kathleen in preschool because we have kids the same age. So we met as preschool moms together. So that was so fun. But Kathleen's really the queen of like taking the dot and really delivering instruction from it. And so when you look at it, you may not know what's going on. So that's why we're so excited to have her here, because she's going to take you step by step on how she's teaching from that and how it's changed over the years, which is, I think, something that keeps us all going in this profession, that creativity that we keep bringing in and iterations of lesson design. And so what it used to be and what it is today is the process we're going to go through for word work. So welcome, Kathleen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, it's been years and evolution and, as just looking backward where we started, 7 years ago with whole language. They're way back from there. And with that, and then coming into Fairlands, I taught in Tracy first and then coming to Fairlands and then moving, the pendulum as we first started, people said, oh, the pendulum. Yep. The pendulum keeps moving. And way back with just that thinking strategies and Stephanie Harvey and everyone was doing word work way back then, words their way. And as things came into units of study and workshop and technology. So I've been working with Lisa, 7 years, I think now. And just the mindset of, the computer lab, that it's not a place, she changed our thinking on it, that it's a place to deliver instruction. It's a place to have kids work on various pieces. And it started way back from then, so that the bringing together all of that has changed or has evolved. My teaching has evolved.
Right.
And with the whole today, the discussions is word work. Well, word work for me has, we did traditional, we did words their way, which focused on the patterns. And for me, it all comes back into what do you notice?
Right.
So as we left words their way and moved into just various things, that's kind of where this all started. And if I think back to me doing very much direct instruction with the patterns, because I believe they need to be taught and then they need to be noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And where you come in with that is kind of where it all started here.
So it's such a beautiful thing to hear you start with that, because I want you to talk to us about this book, but also for our audience out there, I want you to understand that I think the thinking that Kathleen is sharing is, if you're not familiar with Words Their Way and word sorts and word patterns for spelling, rather than giving a list to memorize, it's a different pedagogy practice where you're noticing what the patterns are and identifying them and naming them, and then you're learning that so that you can apply it when you write it yourself. So Kathleen, talk to us about this inspiration and the beginning of your word work in this book.
Well, I think it came from I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it actually came from when Lisa had a hyperdoc on tying into your word, having one special word. And
Yes.
I can't think what the
So what, like one word hyperdoc for the beginning of the year? Like you choose one word as your focus for the year.
Yes. And so it started with me creating a wall, and it came from this book. It came from this, this image I saw. And so we started the year off that way with just finding a word for, and this is in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
When we're in the classroom, they start with summer. What's your one summer word? And
nice.
From this book in itself really talks about the importance of words. And it also, I read it this week with my students this year, obviously virtually, and it also ties into kindness. And we're starting Kindness Week next week, which will be a whole couple weeks for us to really focus on that. But the importance, Kelly, it always goes back to, for me, of noticing. If you don't notice it, I don't know where you go with anything if you don't notice. And so this is where it started for me. But with the start of how I started it, and this is back in the classroom, what it was, for instance, this was is a reflection of when we did growth mindset. So I have a whole hyperdoc on growth mindset. And then at the end of the unit, the kids write a poem for their apply, but they also pick one word. And so they come up with their word, they tell why they chose it. And so this becomes our first sort. This was when I was in the classroom, which we started it differently this year. But then they take the words, they cut them apart, they work in trios, and I don't tell them how to sort. I want to see what do they know about sorting. So then they start sorting on their desk, and then I run around and I check them, and then they tell me, why they sort, how they sort it, and why, because they don't have headers like in Words Their Way. They have headers with the long A and the short A and so forth. And so I start them off this way, which there's all different words, and it's very interesting. You find out right away what they know.
Amazing.
Go ahead,
Kathleen, really quickly. It's a beautiful way to engage your learners to notice words by starting with that book that you shared, that launch, that engagement, that in this classroom, words matter, that is your teaching point to the beginning. And then you invite them to generate the word list by choosing one word for the growth mindset. And then also inquiry into how would you sort these words. So I love the flow and how this is all coming together. So when you did this in the classroom, you mentioned you were able to walk around and see. And next, Kathleen, you're going to show us how you would move that into remotely, which is, I can't even imagine that challenge, but how you've been able to do that this year.
Right. So, so when I did it in the classroom, it was, they make their sort, I take pictures, and I go back and I use it as a teaching doc. So I'm going to share that just quickly because this is the key to me, is the teaching piece of it. And so I had to come up with a way of how to do that, where before, when I would do that in the classroom, if they came up with the words, I would picture them and put nothing on the doc. And then my students would look at them and tell, what do they notice? Okay, so that was really important to me because that's where the teaching comes in. What do they notice and what are they able to look at? And this year, because I didn't have, because I didn't have that ability, I created a Boggle sort, and they just built words. And so what we did as a class, I was able to put this up on this Zoom, sharing my screen, and students would chat in words they noticed. So they would create their words. And as you see here, I just started typing them. So as they chatted them in, I just kept adding their words and adding their words. We talked about different things as we went. And from there, we were then able to look at the words. So
this is amazing. So can you show us like if you were teaching this part, how that would look?
All right. So what I'm going to invite you to do, I'm going to have any viewers that are here, go ahead and look at the Boggle, and create words. Remembering that if you're creating a word and there's only one A, you can't create a word with two. Here we have two vowels, the E's, you can create words with that. So really what I just said was, boys and girls, in the chat right now, or if you're on one of, Facebook, share words and we will start building our list of words from this Boggle. So I have created here a extra column. If words come in, Kelly, we can add these to it. But it's as simple as that.
We do have a couple words coming in, and while they're coming in, I'm going to invite you to, can you zoom in a little bit on that to make sure everyone can see it too?
Yes.
So words coming in are model is the first one. Total is the second one. More is one. More. Root. Let's see, what else do we have? Let's take one more. Dot. And loot. Mead.
Mead.
Mead, like MEAD.
Thank you.
Any more words coming in? So fun. Street.
So as I did this with my students, something I'm going to cover up so I can go down, but something I did with my students, we started right here and talking about capitals and lowercase. So as we look at this, I was sharing with them that, boys and girls, we know that when we're on a computer, many times they capitalize words right away. And we know that as I look at this list, they're all capitalized, but we know as writers, we only capitalize proper nouns and words at the beginning of the sentence. So I constantly am talking to the kids about different things. And sometimes I would go through and change them so that they were lowercase. So I was teaching as I go in this lesson, but also I then invited my students to look at the words and what did they start noticing? So as you look over to the left-hand side of the screen, actually, let me recap back. So as we were looking at words, we went down and we talked about how do we sort words? And this is all student generated because I believe in getting my kids to share. I try not to feed them until I need to feed them. So we came up with this idea down here. It said topics and letters and alphabetical order. And what I've noticed over the years, they usually don't go to sounds. That's just not what happens. And so as they were telling me different things and what they notice in these words, you see color coding. And we just took this first column. So with this column, they started saying, all these words have the letter E. And I said, well, so tell me about that.
Right.
So the first word we came to is the word B. And I said, well, what do you know about those B's? And they said, they have they say their name. So that started us launching off into sounds, which then we went through and highlighted and so forth. And then we went into the other E's. And then those are all of the short sounds. So for instance, if we look at the list that we just generated, you know, same thing. We'd start talking about what are we noticing? And obviously there's not that many words, but same thing would come. But again, I'm not telling them, I'm trying to pull out of the students, what are they noticing? And then kids, of course, they love the alphabetical order, which is the numbers on the side. So then from this work, I pulled it down and we put it in a little chart so that they can see what we're talking about. And then from there, the next step was I wanted them to work on sorting. So what I did was I created the slide deck and pulled what we had worked on, what we had done together, and then it was their turn to do the work because we had 3 other columns that we hadn't done anything with those words. So I took some of those words and created this for them. And we talked, of course, about it before they went off, and I sent it in through Google Classroom for them to use. But they had their labels, and we talked about that. If they needed to form more, how do you form more? And you click on it, make a copy, and you paste it in, or you can get rid of them. Moving the words, how they could just move them into positions. And then they started off and they were now working asynchronously. That was assignment. So it went from synchronous to asynchronous. And from there, I always feel it's super important, the reflection piece. So I went into their their Google Classroom and I pulled. So I pulled different students' work. So I pulled some that had different, the short, the long, the ooh, and then we talked about the different things that students noticed. Here, we had different things. We had homophones, but you're also bringing the language in for them. We always talk about things that don't fit, and then we just went from there.
So you're really teaching them how to be curious and do the inquiry work. You're really scaffolding this even through your remote classroom, because the first part was a model demo. Let's be curious. What do you see? What do you notice together? And then I love how you have moved into the slide template for them to go practice and apply on their own. Like you've tried this out. Let's see what you notice. So can you take us back to those slides really quickly? Because I want the viewers to understand this is a simple Google slide presentation with on the third slide, it looks like what Kathleen has done is just inserted text boxes that have color around them to indicate the headers and then the words, and then the kids can click on them and slide and move them around, and they can create their own labels for the top row. That's the activity. Am I right?
Yes.
And then it would move into you teaching from that, like looking at the different ways they were noticing it, right?
Yes. So now, exactly, Kelly, what you just said was they could have done their own, whatever they wanted to do, and they could move them, they could get rid of them. But what is, to me, really important is that they are able to try that. And there's kids that were more successful than others, as always. But then here, I was able to put that reflection piece in, which for me, I do workshop on the computer, off the computer. It doesn't matter. I'm always doing workshop. Is now those that didn't get that far, they can now see the example. So next time, they'll take something from this to be able to do more next time.
That's a beautiful lesson. I mean, going back, using student examples to go back and teach again, the share reflection piece. I mean, just imagine how your students feel when they see their slide up there. They see their example.
Right.
And sometimes we're talking about how to motivate learners who aren't engaged. I mean, those are the little techniques that really help them feel a part. Like, I'm not just doing this to turn it in and get points or get a check mark, or because my mom and my teacher told me to do it. I'm doing this because we're going to talk about it again. And I want to impress them. I want to be a part and impress my classmates through that share.
Right.
So exciting. Now, I noticed you left the students' names off. Do you do that intentionally?
Yes, I always get the okay with my students, and all my students are always willing to share everything. I'm
Yeah.
like, can I go into your Google Classroom? We're going to edit today. Can we pull your paragraph? And so they know that's a help. You know, I'm there to help. The other students are there to learn. And I won't ever say it, but like something that we moved into for the next lesson was here when I started to show my students the work that they had done. One of my little girls said in the chat, "That's mine." That's mine, Mrs. Whitworth. Because I do purposely, I don't want to share that piece because I will share imperfect work because that's okay. And that's how we learn. So I just, I don't put their names on it. If they want to call it themselves out and share, that's perfectly fine. But
But that's the classroom culture, that we are going to practice something together, then you're going to practice it on your own, and then you're going to come back and see some of that work. So that's building that engagement and community all the time, that routine that you're always building in.
Right. And so, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I was just curious about the growth mindset talk.
Right. So normally at the beginning of the school year, I wouldn't necessarily use a Boggle, but I did that this year because I was just doing something different, and I use Boggle throughout the year. But normally we gather the words, because ultimately I have standards to teach. You know, we use the benchmark grammar, spelling, vocabulary. I have standards. I have short vowels and long vowels and controlled and open and closed syllables. So the Boggle and the word sorts, I start first just to get a pulse on what my students do know, to introduce a bunch of this before I have to teach it within specifics. So normally it starts off with the reflection of a unit. And here's my growth mindset. So Kelly, you inspired me last week with Padlet and Answer Garden. And so we had just finished our growth mindset hyperdoc, and my students had to pick their word, and they did it in Flipgrid. They picked a word and told why they chose that one word from growth mindset. That was so important. So we created this answer garden. And from their answer garden, we created this week's sort. So
Awesome.
these 4 columns are their words. And I did, I kind of went through and I was like, you have to use one word. So I kind of had to do a couple different things. But we started with that this week, and we talked about the words, and then this is what they came up. So this is the growth within the first sort to the second sort, as to what they came up with, how we sort. How we sort, not how we sorting. And it was just a huge change because of what we had talked about. And we also do patterns of power. I have a lot of different things I do for words, but I gave them this, and I told them, I said, boys and girls, do you think that you could do this week by yourself if I put it in Google Classroom? And they were all over it. Yeah, of course we can. So I put it in Google Classroom. They did it asynchronously after we did this part. And here was their, we didn't do a sort with, we did on a doc. So here were their, the tops to tell what the columns were, and below is where they're going to put their words. So then we came back to it for our reflection, and then I just added this to the slide. So this was our review, our reflection, and the students turned it in.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. I just screenshot them in.
Great.
Showed what we had. And then we talked about, and we added on each of the different pieces of learning that kids explored and noticed this week.
It's amazing. This is amazing, because I'm just looking at your second week through this inquiry process. Look at the language that these third graders are pulling out, like ABC order, long vowel, short I, long I, 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables. These are things that normally be taught in isolation, and instead you're teaching them to notice it in any word patterns that they're looking at. And the depth of that skill is just like way more, it just magnifies and it transforms teaching word work, because they're not going to be able to recall that when they need to if they were taught it in isolation. This is so multi-layered, what you're doing with your students.
Right. And what I love about it is then of course, as always, it translates into every book we're reading. It translates in, we do poetry each week, and for numerous reasons, but that's one we can always go back to. So when I do roll into short vowels and we have to do, or long A, they
Right.
start to notice all the patterns. They have heard the words. Some kids will get it now. Some kids will get it later.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just a culmination of,
Mm-hmm.
it's continually spiraling.
And I'm guessing that your classroom as well, Kathleen, is like this routine of I'm going to invite you to think about something. I'm going to invite you to start building off of that. And then we're going to go practice it and notice it and then come back. Do you apply this to all of the subjects that you teach in reading and writing and in math and in science, like some variation of that cycle of inquiry?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I do. My two things in my classroom are, first, you have to notice.
Uh-huh.
And that's the first thing, is notice.
Yeah.
And that ties so much into reading and write. It's with everything, reading, writing, math. It doesn't matter what subject it is, and it's always about the how and the why.
Right.
Those are my two favorite words.
Mm-hmm.
I always say knowledge is nothing if you can't do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it does. It's a spiral effect. And, as we are in remote and every school district does different things and talking about separating reading and writing, well, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work for me. It doesn't, and we constantly have those conversations of, right now when we're learning these words, we're learning them not just to help us as writers, but we're learning them, as we go into syllables in order to do multisyllabic words. And, it's just that integration constantly with them.
That's so fun. And what a perfect use of answer garden here, because it is just sort of the 1 to 2 word thing that you'll see. I love that you had so many students that said positive and mistakes. Those are like your 2 biggest words. That just also highlights the mindset, like the habits of mind that you're building in your curious classroom of students to stay positive, but also there's going to be mistakes. I just love that. That's learning. That's discoursive learning.
Right. Well, and I think we all are that way. And I think, I'm constantly, I'll be on the dock and I'll like right now, how we sorting, it's like, oh, got to edit that. So we are constantly talking about that. And I tell them, if you think I'm going to be perfect, well, you've got another thing coming, because, even as we juggle and we go into technology, constantly things are happening, and they know, email me, because I don't know if you're like this week. I don't know if Seesaw isn't working, will you tell me? So, it's that constant where our expectation is we are all here to learn together and to grow each day.
Right. Right. I'm so impressed with everything you've shared. And I almost want to just zoom in on that answer garden and look at it through the lens of every teacher who's watching this right now or the recorded later, because we need to be kind to ourselves right now. Like, this is the same thing we need to say to ourselves and to our colleagues and to our administrators and to our parents and our student, our community, our people who are at home, who are guardians, who are helping kids and trying to create a space. This is a new way of learning, and just your students kind of captured everything right there that is really important. I see improve on there, and I feel like every week we come here, we're sharing ideas, and I'm so impressed because we're about a month into school now.
Yeah.
And think about where we were a month ago, and already the level of learning that your students are having because of that connection and that thought in your lesson design, the back and forth, the going slow to build routines and then building off of that each week.
Well, and I think too, when you're teaching workshop, it's a constant with the kids, without the kids, with the kids. Mm-hmm. And, when this summer, as I was on our task force and talking about how much Zooming and what's good for kids and what's not. And right now I'm with my kids a lot, but that's because I feel that connection, that connecting through chat, through, you know, a whole nother thing someday we'll have to talk about is Padlet, because Kelly, last week you got me on Padlet and I did 3 this week with my kids and it's unbelievable. I'm just sold on it, but just that connection, that ability to see all students' work and they are learning from those docs. And that interaction is how they're in my classroom. That's how they learn. They learn from each other more so than me. And I hope I create that environment for them. Kelly, I want to share one thing, my next tab. And this is something that it's not like my comma doc, but it's something that I rolled out last year as we did prefixes and suffixes with my kids. And this is a hyperdoc that I did asynchronously with the kids later on. But this is one where this still ties back to the students being the noticers. And here I put Storyworks because we weren't in class, but they have the ability still to find the words. So they're still being the noticers. It's not as that interactive, but they're creating their explore by noticing in different things they work on through these prefixes. And then the explore where gave videos and they had to actually watch the video and chart what they noticed or what a prefix is. But this is one that is very doable. It's very, this came way back from Lisa, I think her there. But something where it's more direct, but it still gives the ability for kids to notice. But again, this is at the end, later on in the school year, much further down, but it gives them the ability to do the work. It provides for them and has the words and it has different activities for them. But I wanted to share because there's so much we can do and we don't always have to be on with our kids. But this is just one that I wanted to share with everyone because there may be something they want to do much more asynchronously and more directly, but this is another way versus putting them on a worksheet or a digital worksheet. I think it's more fun. You kind of talked about the fun. I think my kids have fun. It's really fun and just another way to present information to kids.
This is a great example. I mean, anybody teaching any grade really, because we teach word work, all the way through. So you could just change, you could make a copy of Kathleen's example and not have prefixes, but use the pedagogy that she's built in. It's really clear that like basically what she's done on slide 2, I just want to zoom there and make sure everyone understands how to deliver what the kids would do here. She's linked to Epic Kids and National Geographic. And those are 2 outside websites that students can find an article to read. And while they're reading, they're looking for the patterns of prefixes and generating their word list from that text. So if you were teaching Greek and Latin root words, you could do the same thing. And you can integrate, social studies and word work, or you can integrate math and word work. There's just it's in everything. So teaching those noticings. And then the next 2 slides for her explain part of the hyperdoc, she has just, instead of having to teach it synchronously, she's found a video to directly teach what is a prefix, and then the kids watch it and answer the questions. So that's the explain.
Right. And I did the 2 just because that was introducing prefixes, which we had discussed during the school year, but not as directly.
Yeah.
And then this one I put because I wanted them to.
Okay. I
know
love it.
exactly. And I also, for me, I did include this one because some of my students need this and this works better for them. So I did do that also, which, what you do for kids. But
going back to your page 16, I'm just going to say what your words were is that hyperdocs help to differentiate, meet the needs of all learners. And so when I look at this hyperdoc, I'm thinking about the learners who need to see it more than once, but also getting to generate your own words is going to build some agency and also seeing it in practice from start to finish. So I know this is so many amazing things you've shared. I'm sure Lisa and Sarah want to get in and chat. Just thank you for your sharing. And go ahead, girls. I know you have some comments to share.
Oh my gosh. Of course, a huge fan of layers. Sarah, what do you think? You've been putting up some great.
I'm just blown away by all the different ways that you make learning about stuff that probably wouldn't be that fun or engaging. And not only are you teaching these in such simple yet complex ways, but you're integrating soft skills and just a love of learning on top of it. So like Lisa said, all the layers. I mean, I just couldn't keep up with all the things you were saying, and I'm so inspired by your ability to take the have to stuff that we have to teach, like you said, standards, and turning them into want tos, where kids are actively engaged with sharing their work and you're reflecting that back to them. And just this whole idea of like, I'm not the only teacher in the room, in the Zoom room, right? Like you're finding ways to let the kids be the teachers. And I just want to really emphasize that, I think we think these days that we're the content expert, that you've.
I think something else that Lisa and I've talked numerous times about is sticking. What's stick? What is sticky for the kids? And I truly believe when kids notice, that's what sticks. And you can see it, as an isolation, as much as it is isolation. And then they start reading books, or we start reading books together, and they're constantly, Mrs. Whitworth, did you hear that word? Did you hear that word? And that's the sticky piece, because I personally don't think that, for me, worksheets aren't as effective. They're not sticking. Everyone's like, oh, they don't know what a noun is again. They don't know what So I think that's the key. And that is what continues to drive me into why I do what I do.
I'd love to share a story about Kathleen also. So once I was in her room, it was for the comma lesson, I think. And that's when we had a lot of ahas around sticky learning. And what was it about learning commas? How can they, it was all about the noticings, Kathleen. I remember you sharing that after they did that lesson, they started to go into their independent reading, and they would notice all the commas and tell you about them. So I thought that was like the real sign. But one thing when you were doing that lesson, and I think this is a good reminder for all teachers, she was teaching them appositives. And I'm like, they're third grade, Kathleen. Like I taught fifth grade. I barely got to that. And I'm like, what are you doing to them? She's all, oh no, it's okay. Because they know that they don't even know what that is, but they'll sort for appositives, and then it's all wrong. And then they come to the carpet, and it's all about fixing it in front of them. And I just was like, oh my gosh, that's right. So she has these really high expectations, but she starts off with that real growth mindset attitude where the kids are like, oh, yeah, that's wrong. Okay, show me how to redo that. And so the real solid sticky learning comes when you go and you explain after they've explored, and it's like they would do that sort and bring it to you, and it was all wrong. And then you're like, yeah, that's normal for their third graders. And then you would just resort, boys and girls, is this in the right column? And then it hit me. I'm like, that shared knowledge together as a class, and then with you, and then you adding that teaching point to that moment. Boom. It was like, oh, now I get what it means that it's okay to make mistakes in a classroom.
Yeah. Well, the big thing that you're doing, Kathleen, is teaching skills. Like you're teaching skills that you can apply that are transferable skills. Like, even though you're only in third grade, you can go like anywhere with your word study, right? And reading and writing, and that those skills are going to stick when you leave. When you're in my classroom, they're going to stick, and you're going to have them in fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth and ninth and 10th, the rest of your life, because I taught you the skill and how to identify and how to learn.
Well, and I think even bigger than that for me, Kelly, is if I can teach them to be the responsible and the noticers. That is even, to me, is even a bigger skill, because they will now look at everything through a different lens. So to me, tied into the notice and the how and the why, if that's where they push to, I think to me, that's the skill that's to me, I don't know. That's what my back to school night ends up being.
I
My
love
most
it.
important thing isn't my content. My most important thing is how my students think.
Mm.
So that's just what 27 years have done. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I could just cry listening to her though. I mean, I think your students are so lucky. You're such a gift. I know Lisa and Sarah and I have always admired your work, and we're so honored that you are here on our Facebook Live group. You've been a big supporter of us, and we couldn't do this without you and community, and we just love you so much. We love you so much.
You are.
Well, thank you. And thanks for providing. I know. Thanks for providing, because like I said, I think, I don't know, Lisa, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I've been doing blended teaching for the past 3 or 4 years, probably. I think, Lisa, I don't know. And Lisa and I worked really closely, but I think it's the gift. The gift to me is the minds of your minds, and not everyone thinks this way. And I think that's the gift, the mindset, and the thinking piece. And so I've been able to learn so much. And like I said, Kelly, just last Saturday, it changed my whole week. So
Yeah.
I went to school for 5 hours. It's like, oh my gosh, all right, I got to do this. And this is a way but it's right now for me, it's all, I've got the brain of my technology and blended teaching. I've got that piece, but it's like, how do I make it better for my kids? How do I integrate and have the connectivity? And that's what the Padlet did, or the growth mindset with the answer garden. How do I bring us together? Because that's how my class works best, together. So.
Well, and I think, Kathleen, what you've done today is really reminded me about what learning looks like. It's learning in 2020, learning 27 years ago, learning in the classroom, learning outside of the classroom, learning within Google Apps, learning with different, it's just what does learning look like? It's posing thoughtful questions. It's modeling how to learn. It's the mindset of learning. It's reflecting, and that's where the learning comes out. You've just, the underlying theme of everything you've shared today, whether it's a skills lesson or how to learn, it's just a true emphasis on learning, no matter where you are, no matter where you're sitting. And I just want to appreciate you for that, because it can feel really overwhelming right now that everything feels new and different, and the tools, and it's all so overwhelming. But if you stay true to teaching and learning, right, then we're going to be okay. And that's something that we can all really lean into right now.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping that these Saturday mornings, thank you, Vicki and Lisa. We see some people who come back often. We appreciate seeing you here and joining in the conversation of a real think aloud, and just kind of like a think tank moment for taking a deep breath Saturday morning, regrouping, and then going on with your day and letting it simmer with you a little bit. And then get off your computer a little this weekend. You guys have to take care of yourselves and keep that stamina. But I do appreciate being around you, Kathleen, because you bring a lot of energy to this work, and that's contagious. And while it's not that it's so easy for you, it's that you thrive on a challenge, is what I've discovered about you. I keep learning new things about you, old friend, that when you have a challenge, it invigorates you and brings you energy. So thank you for passing that on to not only us, but to now our whole HyperDoc community. We're so happy we had you on the show today. It was just been really great to listen to you. And I don't know, maybe community, if you want more primary work, you'll come back and show us this amazing stuff she's doing with Padlet. Ladies, you can wait till you see it. We're
going to have part 2 for sure.
Yeah, teaching from Padlet.
Stylist, so if you want to buy some jewelry, you could also get that. If you want to give it, I always see Kathleen with adorable earrings and hops, and she's always so put together. So she is our stylist as well. Her creativity goes beyond the classroom. But I do need to wrap it up, but I do want to just close with what everyone's sharing. Lisa and Kathleen and Sarah have all said is this work is invigorating if that's what we put into it. And if we can find that joy in this remote learning space and find the calm and think about the complexity of what we're doing, I think that will help us get through this new way classroom that we're in. And you've really modeled that for our audience today. So thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Everyone watching, have a wonderful week. We will see you next week. We have a awesome project we're going to share with you next week called Humans of Fill in the Blank. So you're going to want to join us for that next week as well, or we have another guest. We'll have a great week.
Bye. Thank you, Kathleen.
You're welcome. Bye.